an employment lawyer, I guess I'm interested in what you're seeing coming through, because that's going to be, I mean, we've already seen in the States a massive leap in unemployment, which is, far worse than what it looked like for GFC. So obviously we're now kind of expecting a bit of that in our own economy, and I'm just interested in what you're seeing in the market.
Yeah, we're getting queries about it from both sides, employers and employees. Both sides genuinely don't know how to handle this situation. Everyone calls it an unprecedented situation, and that phrase is being used again and again, but it actually is, and we've never seen anything quite like it, and people don't know how to deal with it. So we're having employees coming to us saying, I've been asked by my employer to take an 80% pay cut or even a 50% pay cut. And do I have to accept this? Can they impose that on me? And we're having employers coming to us saying, the shared commercial reality is that we can't keep these people on, can't afford to keep people on. Our revenue streams have dried up. So how do we then go about getting people to take a lower rate of pay, or worst case scenario, how do we go about laying them off?
Yeah, and what does that look like? Because I've heard of some companies as well, as you say, saying that people are going to have to take cuts. And I guess in some ways, to be fair, taking a cut is better than losing your job altogether. I saw Bauer Media shut up shop today. So how can they manage that? Like, is the employer able to make short-term cuts, or what's the law and legal implications?
I mean, what we're advising people is that redundancy should be a last resort in a worst case scenario. Employees have fundamental terms of employment, key terms of employment that can't be changed without their consent. So you're talking about rate of pay, place of work, person you report to, hours of work, things like that. So rate of pay is obviously one of those key ones that can't just be unilaterally changed. There's some employers who have gone out and, rather than doing the consultation, they've just written to employees off the bat and said, your wage rate's being reduced from this date until the end of the lockdown, for example. But the actual process is that you have to consult with your staff. You have to get their agreement to a reduced salary or wage rate. You have to explain the reasons why. You have to listen to their feedback. You have to genuinely take on board that feedback and think about it before you confirm a decision.
Yeah, so there's a process to follow, and you can get in trouble if you don't follow that.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
That's good to know, because obviously there are going to be companies trying to do that, and I wasn't sure what the process is for that. So it's good to know that they have to actually consult the employees and have like a discussion around that. But it's still an interesting one. And I guess what they're trying to do by doing that, though, is to avoid redundancy. So if it is in sort of good faith and they are sort of, doing it for the longevity of the company and hopefully the retainment of those employees, then does it seem like a possible, or is it like a good solution in the short term, do you think?
Yeah. And employees, if they're faced with a proposal like that, you've got to think about the situation that you're in, because there's a whole lot of people who may not have any work at all. So for people, salaried workers, say, who do still have limited work available, if the worst case scenario for them is taking a temporary pay cut, and most employers are only suggesting that it's a temporary pay cut, no one's suggesting it's going to be permanent. People need to think, well, that for me, that's actually not such a bad situation, and have a think about your personal circumstances and your finances and think, can I afford to be getting 20% less in the bank account each paycheck for a limited period? And if you can, then for a lot of people, it might be in their best interest to just agree to that with the employer as a sign of good faith.
Yeah. Are the employers offering or have you had any come through that are sort of saying you can either take a reduction or we can provide you with redundancy? Is that a conversion?
Yes, some employers, are, particularly those with lots of employees, are offering voluntary redundancies, but that's not a particularly attractive option for a lot of people at the moment, because they may not have another role to go straight into.
No.
The other option that we're sort of advising employers is you can sometimes distinguish between the people who are key workers who can work remotely and those who are less critical functions who maybe can't work remotely, and you are entitled as an employer to treat the two groups differently. So some employers are deciding to offer the people who can work remotely to see if they'll accept the 80%, the 20% drop off in salary or wages, and asking the less critical people even to take a period of leave without pay for 3 or 4 weeks, or to take any annual leave that they've got during the next little period as well.
Yeah, and we definitely are. Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of that, and then hearing a lot of people uncomfortable with that though. But that's obviously a discussion that they can have, and then it's up to them whether or not they're able to negotiate their way through that.
Absolutely. Yep. I mean, the key thing's the consultation in good faith. So
Yeah,
you can't just impose any of these things on employees. Even a direction to take annual leave, an employer can direct annual leave to be taken by giving 14 days notice, but you have to first bargain with the employee and find a suitable time for the annual leave to be taken. You can't just write to them, today and say, for the next 2 weeks, we're requiring you to take annual leave or leave without pay.
yeah. So that would still mean, like, if someone was to do that today, they technically couldn't force that leave for another 2 weeks anyway.
For annual leave, yeah, and the annual
Yeah,
leave has to be there as well. They have to have it to use, and
yeah,
because in New Zealand we have most businesses use a normal close down. Most of us take our annual leave end of December, start of Jan. So a lot of people aren't going to have hordes of annual leave just sitting there waiting to be used for something
yeah.
like
Most
this.
of us all used it. I
Yeah,
guess I went to Mexico and used all of mine a month last year,
yeah, well, yeah.
end of
There you
last
go.
year. So
And there's
yeah,
also the issue. There's also the issue. Do people want to be taking it in? Coming up to a New Zealand winter as well. Does anyone want to be taking 2 weeks of annual leave in May in New Zealand
yeah.
and
Well, I
sitting
mean,
around?
obviously no one wants to, but again, it comes
Mm.
down to that negotiation and thinking about your position and your role going forward. Because I think you made a really valid point around, you know, do people want to take redundancy right now? I would err on the side of no. Even once we come out of this whole COVID thing, I think there's going to be some serious fiscal impact. Not even I think, there will be for the next, up to 18 months at least. So to be in a job, even if you are taking that reduction or if you are having to take some forced leave now, is probably a better position to be in than to have no job and be trying to find one, A, during a lockdown, but also B, out the other end, because I think we are going to see a lot of difficulty.
Yeah, absolutely. And individuals have got to think about that. I don't think many companies are doing much, sort of doing anything in an opportunistic way. Companies genuinely don't want to lay people off, I don't think, unless they absolutely have to.
Yeah.
But what we're trying to advise employers is that just because it's in an unprecedented situation, your employment law obligations from both sides don't just go out the window. They're not just suspended because of this unique situation. And I
Yeah.
think some employees are panicking. Some employers are panicking and are forgetting about the basics like consulting in good faith and things like that.
Yeah, and I think that's a really easy thing to do as well once people know that. If they know, they just, consult, have the conversation, explain your situation, then at least you can, and just acting in good faith and not just forcing anything on anyone. It's standard, like if you're having a conversation with anyone or there's an argument or something that needs to be worked out, like you're better to just have that conversation and be upfront about it to kind of, yeah, hopefully some
Yeah.
employees can be a bit understanding over this next wee while as well. So you said you've had some employees coming through as well. What have been some of the key queries from them? Is it, do I have to take these terms, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's mainly people who've been given a proposal by their employer, either to take leave without pay or to accept a reduced rate. I had it, there was a person who came to me where their employer was trying to stagger it over a 12-week period, so accept a certain reduction for the first 4 weeks of a potential 3-month lockdown, and then a different reduction for the next period. So some employers are even thinking, that this lockdown could extend to 3 months potentially, and are thinking about what they might do if that eventuates.
Yeah, well, I think that's fair. The wage subsidy, for example, was a 3-month period. So that kind of does imply that there is going to be some potential for that. Also, though, even if business restarts in 1 month's time, well, 3 weeks as of today,
Yep.
you're still going to have the lag, and revenue isn't going to jump straight back up. So I think I can understand from the employer perspective
Yeah.
but is that not going over very well with employees at the moment?
Not with some. I mean, some are being asked to accept the 80% straight away, and I think there's a bit of confusion about that because one of the conditions of employers getting this subsidy is that they're making their best efforts to pay staff at least 80% of their regular pay, but that doesn't mean they have to reduce everyone to 80% straight off the bat. You know, the best case scenario is employers are able to use the subsidy, the 585 for a full-time worker per week, and they top up the 585 to get to the person's normal salary. I don't think we want to be encouraging employers to automatically drop everyone to 80% just because that's the bare minimum that the terms and conditions of the subsidy sort of says that you should do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I guess it does depend on, you know, how deep the business's pockets are though, and whether or not they can carry it on over the next wee while without that revenue coming in the same. In terms of like, the wage subsidy and everything like that, it's an interesting one because obviously they've opened it up and basically like loosened criteria there, and also contractors, individual contractors and sole traders and things are eligible. Do you think that's going to be audited at some point? Like surely, because at the moment it's very easy to get. You can just come in and get it basically within 5 days, I gather.
Yeah, I mean, we've had clients asking us this question as well. My personal view, and it's not based on any guidance because there hasn't really been any yet, but it's that MSD who are charged with auditing this potentially are going to struggle to get through, are going to struggle to audit everybody. It's going to be some sort of random selection process. So we're just telling employers to stick to the rules, assume that at some stage you might be audited. It's probably not going to happen during the period of the lockdown or in the foreseeable future, but like any audit, there's a slim chance that your name gets pulled out of a generator or whatever, and they do go back and look at it. And Working Income and MSD have said that it can be treated as fraud if an employer makes a false declaration or they know that they're planning to lay somebody off, yet they still claim the subsidy in respect of that person. So employers should be careful.
Yeah, definitely. And that's an interesting one. Like just thinking of it right now, I guess they're throwing those packages out there and trying to hope and help businesses retain employees, but it's it's going to leave them with quite a mess, I suppose.
It's crazy how quickly they're getting processed. We're hearing stories that people are filling in the application form online in the morning and they're having the money in their account by the afternoon, which is great. But it's amazing how quickly it's being done.
Yeah, just out of the government's O1 account, I guess.
Yeah.
But in terms of other kind of trends you're seeing in the employment space, is there anything else that you've kind of that's been interesting coming through over the last few weeks?
There's been a lot of debate about what we've had people asking us about whether they're an essential business or not. That's something that was a really speedy decision that came through from the government last week. It seems like an eternity ago, but it was only a week ago, where they they said that essential businesses would be able to stay open, and then there was a lot of confusion about what was essential and what wasn't. So we did have some people asking us about that in the early stages, but it's been made pretty clear now. But for example, liquor stores, there was confusion initially about whether they would be allowed to stay open, and I think where we've landed with that is that online liquor delivery is fine, but in-person store, your Glengarry, etc., is not fine.
Yeah, so many would argue an essential service during such a time, but
100%.
But it's definitely, that was an interesting one. And then when the warehouse and everything like that, they're now obviously open again for online services. Have you been across that at all?
Yeah, I saw that. I find it a bit odd to differentiate products within a business. For example, the service stations are open, they're classed as essential, but you can buy hot food from them, but you can't buy hot drinks. So that's a bit of a weird one. And stores like the Noel Leeming and the Warehouse are now selling some products, but not others as well, which is quite interesting. Apparently, big headphones, similar to the ones you're wearing, I think are classed as gaming tools. So they're not allowed to be sold because it's seen as a recreational thing. But I would have thought that was something quite useful for people working from home.
Yeah, useful but not essential.
Oh, yeah.
But the interesting one about the petrol stations you said there, and how it's hot food and not hot drinks. They must have changed that since early on, because I did see when I was out for a walk, keeping my 2 meters,
Yeah.
someone coming back from like Wild Bean with a coffee or something like that during the breakdown. So I reckon they stopped the hot drinks because everyone would have gone there for coffees, and then it just would have been like a
perverse
dungeon.
outcome. I
Yeah.
guess it just encourages people to congregate. Yeah. They
Yeah.
definitely I went down the other day to get a coffee and was out of luck, so they definitely have changed that.
Yeah. Good. I'm sorry that you're missing your coffee, but it's
Yeah,
for the best.
it probably is.
In terms of, I don't know, like if you're across kind of sort of much in the innovation space and things like that, or have had time to reflect on that, but another interesting time for them in terms of employment. I know someone who's just taken a role working for a startup, and they've actually waived, I think, the 3-month trial period.
Right.
And then have said, yeah, we'll include redundancy and things like that to try and get this person on. So there are obviously some companies that are trying to counter in order to hire talent throughout this period. Is there any tips or anything you can share with startups or individuals looking for employment over the next wee while in that space?
Well, if you're trying to bring people on right now, and that, if there's a reason to bring a whole lot of new employees into a company, you want to offer the terms and conditions of employment that you offer, you want them to be as attractive as possible, obviously, but that can include maybe something like redundancy compensation, because it's an uncertain time. So people might want to know that if the business went belly up for whatever reason, they'd at least have some compensation at the end of it. There's no legal entitlement to pay people redundancy compensation. It's pretty rare, but you can include it in an agreement, say 2 months of wages or salary if in the event of a redundancy, so something like that. And the trial period thing is entirely at the discretion of the employer anyway. You have to have 19 or fewer employees to be able to use one of those 90-day trial period provisions, but just because you do fit into that category and have less than 19 staff, it doesn't mean you need to include one. So an idea might be not to have that, because people don't like the idea that they can go and work for someone and do a really stealing job, and then on day 88 they can be given notice of termination for no reason whatsoever. So it's just, you could put things in the agreements to give people a bit more security, I guess, and certainty.
Yeah, in terms of redundancy and things like that, do they have to, so obviously consultation whenever you're renegotiating terms and anything is one of the key things you've outlined. The other thing is, with redundancy, do you have to give a reason at the moment, or can you just be like, it's COVID, we've got to cut this many people when you're on the block? Like, what's the process for that?
There's quite a set process under the law, and it can't be rushed even due to COVID. So there's got to be a genuine business need for the role no longer to be there, and it always has to be about the role. It can't be the person. So there's been numerous cases over the years of employers picking a person who they don't think's the right face for the company anymore, or they're underperforming or whatever. There's a long established line of law that says redundancy can't be used as a guise for performance managing someone out or getting rid of someone who's no longer the right fit for the organization. So there has to be a genuine business reason why the position is no longer needed. And you do have to back that up with information. So for something like COVID, it probably is almost a purely financial reason, but you have to be able to, at least, you don't have to hand over all your books and financial data to the employee, but you do have to talk them through it and provide information where it's appropriate and say, this is the particular area of our business or our revenue that's going to suffer over the next period. It can be, and you can anticipate it. It doesn't have to be something that's actually happened. It can be an anticipatory drop in revenue, but you do have to have a genuine business reason. You have to talk them through it, and then you have to consider all alternatives to redundancy as well. So can they be redeployed to some other area in the business? Could they stay on in that role but take a reduced wage or salary, things like that? Redundancy absolutely has to be a last resort.
Yeah, and that makes sense in terms of acting in good faith and trying to retain people in employment over the next wee while. I guess, so consultation's the really key thing that keeps coming up, and then ability to kind of search for and negotiate for other opportunities for that employee. Because I guess when you're looking at your business right now, you'll be looking at where the fat is, like where you're spending a lot of money, your costs are, and whether or not they're delivering to the revenue at the moment, and if they're not, then trying to reduce those areas. So
yeah, I mean, sometimes it's really obvious. Like one of the topical ones that has come out this week was Radio Sports. So their station, the programs that were on that station as of Monday are no longer in operation. So in a situation like that, I mean, the employer really is left with no alternative but to make redundancies, because there literally is no program that's being produced that those people were working on. So, but even for something like that, you still do have to go through a consultation.
Yeah. Cool. That's super handy. It's been great just like catching up and hearing what's happening in your space. It's obviously only going to heat up over the next few months, which is good for you at least. You're very employable.
Yeah, but that's a fortunate position. There's so many people that aren't in that situation. Yeah, lawyers and accountants, I guess, and people like that are relatively lucky compared to others, and it's easy for us to work remotely as well.
Yeah, exactly. I guess it's just one of those things for employers, making sure that they're consulting and acting in good faith over the next wee while, but for employees as well, trying to negotiate with those businesses, because as you say, you're lucky to have employment at the moment. That's sort of the vibe that's coming through and will be likely for the next few months. So if you do have to take some, if you do have to negotiate with your employer, I guess that's just the best probably course for at least the lockdown period, and probably a little longer. So,
and let's just hope everything gets back to normal as soon as possible, but who knows when that's going to be.